Good morning, ASEAN. Freshen up your world, your thought, and your idea with us every weekday from 7:30 to 8 a.m. I'm Patsurang Desha Puthanangsi.
And then we now proceed. It's Tuesday, the 1st of October. We will start first with the tropical storm,
the WUTIP. Yeah, as the tropical storm WUTIP finally landed in Vietnam and lashed out in the central region yesterday after sinking at least 2 Chinese fishing boats near the Paracel Islands. The storm uprooted trees, cut power lines, and damaged more than 1,000 houses. There was no immediate word of injuries, flooding, or major structural damage. Vietnam's National Weather Center said WUTIP had weakened from a typhoon to a tropical storm by the time it made landfall. It was packing sustained winds of 117 kilometers or 73 miles per hour. Officials evacuated tens of thousands of people from the storm's path over the previous day. Schools in 5 central provinces closed, and the Coast Guard told 61,000 fishing boats with 303,000 crew members to take shelter. By nightfall, WUTIP had blown the roofs off of more than 1,000 houses in one district alone. Local government official Pham Hu Thao also added that the TV footage showed uprooted trees and deserted cities, streets in central towns close to the storm center. WUTIP sank at least 2 Chinese fishing ships as it neared the coast near the Paracel Islands, leaving 75 fishermen missing, according to the website of the Hainan government in South China. 2 vessels sank Sunday, and contact with the 3rd has been lost. WUTIP was the strongest typhoon to gather off Vietnam this season. The most powerful Asian storm this year was Typhoon Usagi, however, which caused at least 33 deaths in the Philippines and China earlier in September. Vietnam is prone to floods and storms which kill hundreds of people and cost millions of dollars in damage each year.
And the same typhoon is said to be heading for Thailand and will bring it with heavier floods and also rainfall, according to the Thai Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Department. Over the past 2 weeks, flooding has already ravaged 32 provinces, killing 22 people and damaging 11,400 homes, 4,200 roads, and 170 bridges. The situation has only returned to normal in 7 provinces, though many are expected to face the wrath of the typhoon. WUTIP will bring heavy downpours to some parts of the northeast and the north. Chat Chai Promler, Director General of the Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Department, warned yesterday. He said he was worried that flooding in many provinces would worsen. We are closely monitoring the situation, and our emergency response teams are preparing to provide timely assistance, he said. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra visited Srisakhet and Ubon Ratchathani yesterday to monitor the delivery of aid. 6 deaths have been reported in Srisakhet so far. Prachinburi Province, water levels rose to about 60 centimeters on most roads, flooding shops and leaving several cars and motorcycles stalled. However, an update released by 304 Industrial Park in Prachinburi said that the water level was high initially, but things had returned to normal by Saturday evening after the water was drained. Poonsak Sutan Thawitbun, Executive Vice President of the Industrial Park, said that the emergency response team, supported by 20 water pumps and 11 backhoes, were on the 24-hour standby, even though the estate is 20 meters above the sea level. The industrial park and factories on the estate were providing aid and relief supplies to flood-affected residents nearby.
Tourism operators do not see their industry, tourism operators in Thailand, emerging as a hero to save the economy this quarter, blaming falling consumer purchasing power and the rising cost of living. In a poll released yesterday by the Tourism Authority of Thailand, they said the trend was clear. The economy would falter, consumers would tighten their belts, and the operators' profit margins would take a drubbing. The survey was carried out from September 10th to 17th on 2,100 respondents. 700 businesses and 1,400 people in 7 provinces, namely Bangkok, Kanchanaburi, Chonburi, Nakhon Ratchasima, Chiang Mai, Phuket, and Surat Thani. About 48% of the businesses believe the economy would stage a decline in the rest of the year, and their sales would slip 22.9%, while 22.9% said their business would still grow and their revenue would increase 19.4%. People plan to cut their tourism budgets by 21.1% due to the increase in living expenses and public utility bills, while their income stays almost the same. About 65.8% of the people polled said political conflict was the major risk for economic prospects, followed by inflation in products and services, 61.6%, and protests, 55.6%. Pongsathorn Ketsamlee, Deputy Governor for Policy and Planning, was not worried, saying the country's tourism outlook was bright, as foreign visitors would continue to come. Even if, in the worst-case scenario, the foreign tourists stay here for the same amount of time as in the past and spend the same amount, there will still be more of them arriving. This year, the agency projects foreign tourist arrivals leaping 17.5% to 26.26 million from 22.35 million last year. The flooding, which has spread to wider areas across the nation, would not dampen the tourism outlook due to the low season. Instead, it would wash out other industries, especially agriculture. About 85.2% of people showed interest in domestic travel over the next 3 months, and 85.7% intend to travel once, with Chiang Mai as the top destination, followed by Chonburi and Rayong. They plan to stay 2 nights. Well, only 0.6% of them said they wanted to travel abroad during the period. Well, Japan was the favorite destination, followed by Singapore and China, then Thailand. Well, of course, to boost tourism, 71.3% of the people said the government should offer tax breaks by allowing them to deduct tourism bills.
Malaysia's Prime Minister has defended a proposal to bring back detention without trial, as protesters yesterday accused him of breaking a vow to do away with draconian laws. Around 30 activists, right lawyers, and members of the public staged a protest march to Parliament in Kuala Lumpur over the government's bid to amend a 1959 Crime Prevention Act. The change would allow police to hold suspects for years without charge, critics say. Prime Minister Najib Razak's government has justified the move by saying police need a stronger hand to deal with a wave of violent crime that has erupted in recent months. Speaking during an overseas trip, Najib said the amendment was aimed at fighting organized crime and would not be abused to squelch political challenges. We will make sure that no one will be victimized, the national news agency Bernama quoted Najib as saying. Activists and the opposition, however, accused Najib of reneging on an earlier promise to move away from decades of authoritarian rule. Under public pressure for reform, Najib in 2011 abolished the Tough Internal Security Act and the Emergency Ordinance. Both had allowed detention without trial, and critics say they were abused by the 56-year-old ruling coalition to silence dissent.
Indonesia concedes on Australian Prime Minister demands. What are they? After the break. The Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono has made significant concession to Tony Abbott, the Australian Prime Minister's demands on boat people in talks in Jakarta yesterday. Well, they both agreed that Indonesia would need to make direct deals with Australia to try to solve the people smuggling problem. Until now, Indonesia's position has been that any potential policies should be dealt with at a multilateral forum. The Bali process and many of Mr. Abbott's policies, from boat towbacks to establishing transit ports for asylum seekers on Indonesian soil, have been considered a threat to Indonesian sovereignty. But after meeting Mr. Abbott, Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono agreed the countries needed to work one-on-one. He said Indonesia has striven to overcome this issue, but it would be much better if the cooperation was at the bilateral level. The statement opens the door to Indonesia making more concessions to Australian demands, though Mr. Abbott and Dr. Yudhoyono left the tricky details for later. Australian Immigration Minister Scott Morrison and his Indonesian counterpart Djogo Suyanto will meet soon to thrash out details. Mr. Abbott also turned the tables on the sovereignty issue, saying after the talks in the presence of Yudhoyono that people smuggling is an issue of sovereignty, especially for Australia. But he also emphasized Australia's total respect for Indonesia's sovereignty, a total respect for Indonesia's territorial integrity. Indonesian Foreign Minister Martino Tlegawa, who has made much of the sovereignty issue, said he was reassured about a commitment. To sweeten the people smuggling pill, Mr. Abbott announced a $15 million commitment to a new Australian Centre for Indonesia. Studies based at Melbourne's Monash University to build trust and understanding between the two nations. He also placed Indonesian sensitivities by taking an unusually tough line on protesters in Australia agitating for independence for the Indonesian territory of Papua. The government of Australia takes a very dim view of anyone seeking to use our country as a platform for grandstanding against Indonesia. We will do everything that we possibly can to discourage this and prevent this, quoted. While being overseas made no difference to Mr. Abbott's strong political campaigning against Labour, he apologized in a dinner speech for Australian antics in putting sugar on the table for people smugglers and for cancelling the live cattle trade. He concluded that never again should this country take action that jeopardizes the food supply of such a friend and partner as Indonesia.
The CEO of telecommunication company Telenor said that mobile phone subscriptions in Myanmar will increase more than fivefold by the end of 2017. Telenor, the Nordic region's largest phone company and one of the two operators selected to build Myanmar's telecommunications networks, expects the license to be issued formally by the end of the year, John Frederick Baksa said. Services will start 8 to 9 months after that, he said in an interview in Singapore on September 28th. Penetration figures will grow from presently below 10% to a very visible figure in a very short time, Baksa said. We shouldn't be far away from 50% penetration already 3 years down the line. Myanmar selected Telenor and Ooredoo QSC of Qatar in June, opening up one of the world's last remaining untapped markets. The expansion in Myanmar will boost Telenor's sales by 7 to 8% in 2020, according to an August estimate by Swedbank AB. Baksas declined to give financial targets for the Myanmar investment. Telenor and Ooredoo beat 9 other bidders, including Singapore telecommunications billionaire George Soros and Bharti Airtel in the final stage. The licenses will allow the carriers to run a nationwide wireless network serving Myanmar's about 59 million people for 15 years. The license term will start when the license is formally issued, said Baksas, who joined Telenor in 1989 and has been its CEO for 11 years.
Let's go find some updates in Singapore as the government has announced more measures to strengthen the integrity of the public service. From Tuesday, all public officers will need to declare within 7 days whenever they visit any local casinos more than 4 times a month or if they buy any annual pass. But for certain groups of officers, tighter rules will apply. They include officers who are in positions that expose them to the risk of being tempted or exploited, or whose misconduct will have significant risks to the reputation of a public service. They'll have to declare every visit to a local casino with 7 calendar days. But one category of officers will be prohibited from visiting casinos unless they're doing it as part of their work. There are those who enforce operations in the local casinos, who regulate the activities of or negotiate business arrangements with the local casino operators. As part of the review, the Public Service Division also strengthened measures to reduce the risk of fraud and corruption. Currently, some agencies with positions of high risk of corruption already practice job rotation. Some agencies also impose block leave as a fraud prevention and deterrence measure. From January the 1st next year, job rotation and block leave will be enforced for officers holding positions which are more susceptible to being tempted if the officer were to remain in the same job for too long. Depending on the nature of their work, these officers will be subject to either one or both measures. Under the new rules, these officers should not serve in the posts for more than 5 years. The code calls on public officers to work with the elected government to serve the people and shape Singapore's future and uphold the integrity and reputation of the public service.
Still, in Singapore, we'll find out about the Cambodian domestic helpers from this report by the Strait Times.
Cambodian women are making their way to become domestic helpers in Singapore as part of a Manpower Ministry pilot scheme. A handful of maids arrived in Singapore homes last week, and about 400 are expected by the end of the year. Many of these Cambodian helpers have experience working in Malaysia, making them attractive to Singaporean employers.
我希望新加坡，因为新加坡做得很好，然后他帮忙好好来的，屋子很小，不是很大的，你可以就好好来的，不是很大。
跟马来西亚有什么不同？
马来西亚是很大的，因为新加坡的家很小，因为马来西亚很大的就一天就不完，就2天。
The women in Cambodia have limited job options, mostly working in factories or as domestic helpers. The salaries for both are barely 150 Singapore dollars a month. However, working as a maid in Singapore, they can receive at least 450 Singapore dollars a month.
I want to earn money for my family.
I come to Singapore work because I don't have my money. After I go back to Cambodia, I can open my house, I can open my shop.
Okay. Although labor activists in Cambodia are worried that the women will have a hard time adjusting to city life here, 26-year-old Rosh Chantry said it will not be a problem, as she will be spending most of her time in the flat doing household chores.
因为我跟他讲不是煮菜，不是去种菜，不是在家里面做东西、买东西。Very can cooking, can 煮菜, can mop, can clean something.
Before coming to Singapore, they had spent time in a training center in Phnom Penh, learning household skills as well as safety precautions, especially when cleaning HDB windows.
គ្រូបរៀនឲ្យជូតកញ្ចក់ទៅចាក់សាវរួចហើយបាទចាក់សាវមួយជាន់ហើយរួចទៅបានបើកចក់ក្រៅជូតខាងក្រៅហើយមករួចទៅបានតែសាវជូតខាងក្នុង
These women hope to return to Cambodia with enough money to buy land, renovate village homes, open shops, or support their siblings' education.
ខ្ញុំមកធ្វើការនៅសិង្ហបុរីយកលុយទៅបើកហាងនៅស្រុកខ្មែរហាងកាត់ដេរនោះ$5,000
I work the Singapore 2 years. After I go back, I want open my house $3,000 dollar. After I can open the shop and house hub and the shop hub.
The government will track the progress of the pilot scheme, and if everything proceeds smoothly, Cambodia will be added to the list of approved sources for domestic helpers, joining the Philippines, Indonesia, and Myanmar. Filipino maids can command a monthly salary of about $500, while Indonesian and Cambodian maids typically ask for $450. The salary for a Myanmar maid is approximately $420 a month.
That's it for today's edition of Good Morning ASEAN. We'll see you again, same time, same place, same channel.
Thank you so much for joining มีนาจงประสิทธิ์
อนันต์พัฒน์สุรังเดชาพุทธังศรีสวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ